Okie dokie. Welcome back, everybody. It's that time of the week again. Record Live. Jared, great to see you. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I had a bit of a cold or something. It wasn't COVID between this time last week and now. So that knocked me around a bit, but I'm feeling good. The sun is shining this afternoon, so I'm out on the balcony soaking a little bit of that up. It's good.
Yeah, it looks lovely. That golden hour right now. Yeah, that's good. It's been obviously a week working from home yet again, so that always brings challenges. And today we found out the lockdown in Sydney was extended, which is no fun. But anyway, we just roll with the punches, and Record Live still happens, so that's good. So today, everybody, we are talking about a subject that is dear to the hearts of many, something that we partake in, most of us, every week or most weeks, and that is Sabbath school. And this is a topic that can create some debate, but can also, it can be a huge blessing as well to people that attend. So I'm sure we'll get a mixed bag of responses today, and we do encourage you to jump in the comments if you have opinions or if you have questions for our wonderful special guest today, which is Pastor Lyndelle Peterson. And she's joining us from Melbourne. She works for the AUC and is the Sabbath School and Personal Ministries Director, I believe. Welcome, Lyndelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's an honor to have you here to share with us today. Before we start, just delving into the topic, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and maybe what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. So at the risk of correcting you, I'm actually the Director of Personal Ministries, Sabbath School and Stewardship. So I've got 3 portfolios that I work on. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. At the Union, Sabbath School is a particular passion of mine. I'm a pastor. Well, I've been working as a pastor for, I think, 10 years now. Started at the Union in the beginning of 2019. We made the move to Melbourne. My husband's a pastor working in Melbourne, and we've got 2 young kids, Georgia, who's nearly 4, I should say, and Chloe, who's nearly 2. So day to day, what does the day to day look like? Chaos. So, for example, last week or the week before, I was in Jindabyne presenting to the South New South Wales pastors about elders. That weekend, I was meant to be in WA doing training for stewardship, spiritual gifts. So, that ended up on Zoom. And this week, I was meant to be up at the Central Coast filming for our Young Adult Sabbath School series. So a little bit of travel is involved in my work, but mostly I have the huge privilege of working with the team of Sabbath School, Personal Ministries and Stewardship Directors across Australia. So in the local conference, every conference has a director in one of these areas. They may not always be full-time. It may be a conference president in some of the smaller conferences, but I work with that team. So we come together for advisories, we develop resources together. I support them in the goals that they want to achieve in their conference, help them with training, that sort of thing. So it's a really fun job. I love it. And we've got an amazing team of directors in Australia.
Sounds very busy, Lyndelle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if the busyness comes from having the small children though, because work I can manage. It's the young kids that are chaotic.
For sure. Well, Sabbath school is such a core part of the Adventist faith. I mean, it's something that happens every week as well as church. And I always find it interesting because in a way, I think some people would argue that it can actually be more important than church because it's kind of like that individual and also group exploration of the Bible for ourselves rather than just passively listening. But so many people I know either don't attend regularly or have issues with it. I'm just wondering, I guess maybe we'll start with the conversation, post-COVID, because I have definitely noticed a change in attendance and sort of the attitude around it since then. What have you noticed? What has been some of those trends that you've seen happen?
Yeah, so I suppose in Australia I can speak to particularly. I mean, with all the different changes, as I mentioned, even with my job, things changing in terms of, border closures and are you allowed to be open? Is church online or is church in person? Has caused a huge amount of disruption. And I think Sabbath School has been a victim of that just as much as every other aspect of church has been as well. In terms of how we're going, the really interesting thing for me actually came out of that, the AUC survey, the article that Record did about changes in church attendance from 2019 to 2021. And while both have dropped, I think it was worship services was something like 12%, Sabbath School was 7%, which is actually less than the worship service. And I was thinking about this, and I reckon it's probably because Sabbath School is a place for community and connection. And, you'll go on Zoom or you'll get online to connect with people, and because you want dialogue and you want to engage, especially during a time like this, perhaps more than you'll get online just to listen or watch something and not engage. And to me, it actually says that people really want to engage with Bible study. They want to connect with other people. And Sabbath School is, in my opinion, a really great way of doing that. And so to talk about our numbers declining, we don't really have the stats to know. Anecdotally, I guess you can walk into a church, and it depends on the context, to see what the state of Sabbath School is like in that church. But I think above all else, what it's showing us is that we really just desire a place to connect, to find community, to find our kind of people, and to engage in Bible study that is a dialogue and that is back and forth, where we can open up the word and study and journey together. And I think that's a really positive thing.
Lyndelle, what do you think some of the challenges are that are facing Sabbath School, just like in today's modern era, in terms of church in Australia? What are some of the things that you see that are either challenging, not just numbers, but also the quality of the Sabbath School that people, or the experience that people are having?
Yeah, I think that's, so I mentioned this clear desire that we see for people to have community and fellowship and to connect with others, which plays out in Sabbath School. But I think the reality is that in some contexts, people aren't finding that type of connection. And it depends on local context and, what's happening that week and that sort of thing. And so I think a challenge for our Sabbath schools is to be a place where people can feel safe and can find connection and can find community. And I think there's a variety of different ways that we can do that. And I think there are a variety of different things that can hinder that as well. It's all about how we teach the Sabbath School lesson. It's been mentioned many times before, are we just going through the Sabbath School pamphlet, which can be incredibly exclusive? If you haven't read the pamphlet, it's like, well, I can't actually contribute. Or are we entering into more of a Bible study discussion and a dialogue on the themes of the pamphlet? Are we being aware of people that are visiting? I know I visited, I was a Sabbath School director in Greater Sydney for a couple of years. And even in my role at the AUC, I've visited many different Sabbath schools. And some you go in and you feel really warm and noticed and appreciated and welcomed, regardless of whether you're a pastor or a director, whatever. Others, I could walk in and no one will speak to me. And I know that's the experience for some people in Sabbath School. I think that's a minority experience. I'm glad to say that that's happened maybe once or twice, in my time. Mostly it's this embracing, encouraging type of thing. But I think we just need to be aware of that. How are our Sabbath schools creating a warm and friendly environment for people to come in, to have dialogue that's not exclusive, that creates opportunity for connection and not just a teaching moment.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I know in Jared's editorial, I think it was actually a quote from you, Lyndelle, but I could be wrong. There was at least talk about how, I think it was Ellen White originally said that Sabbath School could be used as a place for like outreach, and how it's such an awesome platform for that. But over time, it's sort of become more of an insular thing, and maybe sometimes cliquey, or just not the way perhaps it was intended. Do you see that happening? Is that like across the board? And what are some of the things we could do about that?
Well, this is the reason why I'm so passionate about Sabbath School, because what frustrates me is every week we have as a church, we really want to do discipleship well. We talk about it all the time. It's a bit of a, Christianese kind of word. Like, we need to come up with a discipleship strategy, and we need to emphasize discipleship. And it frustrates me because every week we have people meeting in these, this pre-existing discipleship group that's been around for, over 150 years, since the beginning of Adventism. And it's set up, to study the word before we go into the worship service, to come together. I guess the challenge is, we've lost that emphasis. Like you said, when Ellen White talks about it, it was always intended to be a soul-winning group. That was always the purpose of Sabbath school. Whereas what we tend to see now is more of a Bible study small group type setting. But I think if we shift our focus slightly and rethink, okay, if my small group, if my Sabbath school is to be evangelistic, and we shift our focus and think, well, how can I create a space that welcomes people in and that grows my group and isn't just about the Bible study, but it's about every aspect. It's this holistic kind of Sabbath school. Then I think there is so much potential for what Sabbath school could do in Australia. And I think especially now, when people, people are struggling for connection, and we've seen that play out with COVID as well. And so for someone to enter one of our churches and just attend a worship service is incredibly intimidating. You can come in, yes, and slide into the back seat, but you may never even get spoken to. You can sit and listen and consume, and unless someone comes in, welcomes you, or sits beside you, it's a really isolating experience. But if we were to create our Sabbath schools as that space, bring someone in, they're welcomed at the door, and say, hey, we'd love to connect you with a Bible study group. You can't get lost when there's only 5 or 6 other people in the room, that someone will talk to you, someone will engage with you. So I think it's just an area of church life that we really need to put some more attention behind, and sort of put a bit more of an evangelistic focus and see the potential of what Sabbath school can really be.
Yeah, in my editorial, I quoted Ellen White saying, the influence growing out of Sabbath school work should improve and enlarge the church. Yeah. How do you see Sabbath school improving and enlarging the church? Like, how would a well sort of formed Sabbath school actually do that?
So I guess, to me, and I have to be careful here because I don't want to be like product placement, but at the union, we've worked with the team of directors to develop a model for Sabbath school called Sabbath School for Life, which looks at not just the Bible study time. It does look at the Bible study time, but it also looks at that couple of 10 to 15 minutes before you go into Bible study, and says, how about you consider adding some prayer, intentional prayer. I mean, obviously everyone prays, but do some intentional prayer for someone new to attend your group. And then after you've spent some time with prayer, praying specifically for someone to join your group, someone new, for someone we can invite, you spend some time talking about caring for the group. So what are some care needs? Who needs to be called up? Who hasn't visited in a while? Who needs some help with assistance at home? Who might be unwell? That's kind of shepherding element of church life. Spend a couple of minutes talking about that. And then a share time, spend a couple of minutes talking about how can we as a group do something evangelistic. And it could be as simple as, let's all have a church, let's all have a Sabbath school social and invite our neighbours, over for, we'll all get together for lunch, invite your neighbour, invite a workmate, something that is a bit less confronting for someone who may not have a Christian background. But let's raise money for a project, or let's go serve our local community in some capacity. It's just adding an evangelistic type element. And so, as a team of directors, we decided when I first came into this role, let's not train on anything else. Let's commit to this. We'll do other types of training, but let's use this as our Sabbath school training. Because we all agreed that it was such a powerful tool to be able to just have that focus of pray for those who aren't in our group, share look for ways to share, and just care for each other. Look for shepherding opportunities in our group. And so I think that's the best start. Whenever I do Sabbath school training, I always say to them, if you can implement just one of those, you will see changes in your group. And I've heard heaps of churches get back to me and say, oh, we just implemented praying for someone to join our group, and it's completely changed the tone of the group. Or another group that were really intentional about the caring aspect, and they nearly tripled their group size just because they started texting people and calling people that had stopped attending. And so, you know, I mean, it's common sense, but I think we're just not really intentional. We just don't really think about it. So I would love to see our churches just start to think about some of those things when they do Sabbath school. And can I say one quick thing too?
Yeah.
Our Sabbath school leaders are some of the most devoted church members that I've ever seen. Whenever I do training, whenever I've trained, Sabbath school training is always the most well attended because they really care. They want to improve. They want to do good things. They want to see their Sabbath school grow. And so I think we're in a really good position to see something great in Sabbath school across Australia. I just think we need to give it more attention and focus.
Yeah, totally. Back that, Lyndelle. All the Sabbath school leaders I've ever seen are just so dedicated, and I always look at them and I'm like, oh my goodness, how do you not burn out with this? It's amazing. I'm really interested because, you know, you're talking about this outreach aspect, and I love that. I'm totally behind that, but I sort of see a little bit of disconnect potentially between like bringing people in and the actual content of Sabbath school, because in my experience with Sabbath school, often it's a place where, maybe this is just my church or the churches I've been to, but it's quite a theologically heavy kind of a space, and there's a lot of jargon, and sometimes there's a lot of argument, or like, you know, this is what I think is, and I don't really know if that's necessarily the best place to bring a visitor or to bring someone who's not familiar with things like that. What do you have to say? Like, how do you deal with that?
I would say, firstly, don't discount how what you pray for can change the nature of a group. You start praying for visitors to come, and people start thinking like visitors and anticipate that the Holy Spirit is going to bring visitors. So let's not negate the power of those kind of prayers. The other advice, or the other thing that I would suggest, or what I've done is, again, in our Sabbath School for Life training, when it comes to the lesson time, we kind of suggest Sabbath schools do something maybe a little radical. And it's not necessarily, it's sort of put down the pamphlet for a little bit. Use it to study and prepare during the week, but put it down on Sabbath morning, or as one trainer said to me, leave it in the car. And when you do your preparation, pick one of the key themes or the key Bible verses and explore that. So we use a little thing of ask, analyze, apply, which means ask an opening question, personal icebreaker type question, analyze, unpack the text. You could use something like Discovery Bible Reading, which has come from SPD Discipleship Team, which is great. Anyone can use that. And then apply. There always has to be something that applies to my life. There has to be something that I can relate to and that I can take home and that will impact my week. And that kind of method where you're not sort of going sort of day by day and entrenching in the finer details, that in-depth Bible study of one key concept or passage tends to open people up more to exploring ideas rather than just translating opinions and ideas across. And it's been an incredibly effective tool to engage people in conversation rather than just sort of be a teaching mechanism. The other thing about the ask, analyze, apply approach is this apply idea is something that I think we miss in Sabbath schools a little bit as well. And I was actually speaking to a director this morning about this, and he made this comment of, you know, in our kids' Sabbath schools, they always get something to take home. That really brings the Bible story to life, whether it's like a craft or something they've created or a worksheet or something like that. They've always got something to take home. But in our adult Sabbath schools, we don't give them anything to take home. It's often, okay, time's up, quick, put our pamphlets away and that's it. Whereas I think what people are crying out for is, I really want to engage. I want to study the Bible. I want there to be dialogue, but also I want to take something home, something that applies to my life. Something that will change the way that I live during the week. And that's where we start to see Sabbath school become more than just information sharing. It becomes transformational because it's actually relating to me in my everyday life.
I just want to pick up, Lyndelle, we've had a comment from one of our viewers, Len Knott, and I just want to pick up his comment. He says, how do we stop the generational loss of youth? They do not want to attend adult Sabbath school. I want to add to his comment a little bit. It feels like there's a bit of a transition problem between the kids divisions, which are very well attended. You know, well-stocked volunteers, parents who are passionate about bringing their kids to Sabbath school so they learn, the stories, the Bible stories, the truths that are found in the Bible. And then there's the youth Sabbath school, which also can be quite a vibrant space in many churches. There's young people who are engaged, excited, running services maybe once a month, or once a quarter they get a service and they get to be part of that. There does seem to be a disconnect in terms of transitioning them into adult Sabbath school. If they don't have kids till later, they're stuck in the middle. If they do have kids, maybe they can't attend for a little while because they've got tiny kids. And how hard is it to get tiny kids to Sabbath school on time, each week? There's challenges there, but then not necessarily finding a place. And so there's this older generation who are incredibly faithful at Sabbath school. There's a younger generation of babies and kids who are, there every week. Maybe they're even brought by their grandparents. And then there's this missing generation in the church of, that transitional period. Any thoughts around that and how we can maybe get better or how we can change the system to fix that problem?
Yeah, and this is a really common question. And, in my experience as a pastor, I've worked in sort of some larger churches where there's been an active youth ministry. And so I've seen where Sabbath school can work really well for youth ministry. But I've also seen where it can be a real struggle, especially if you don't have sort of a good sort of youth ministry base in terms of just amount of people. Do you know what I mean? In kids. And then you've highlighted something that is really close to my heart at the moment as well, because I've got young kids. And so at Sabbath school time, I'm in beginners in kindergarten with them, often, leading or doing stuff with them. So where's the space for that type of age group? Is it, my husband and I, we just have to tag team, or what kind of happens to them? And these are challenges that we're trying to actually address as a team. In terms of what is there for young people, how do we address that? I think the challenge is, and someone challenged me on this as well, just because our young people aren't there on Sabbath morning pre-church in Bible study doesn't mean that they're not during the week in small group and in Bible study as well. I think we need to provide multiple opportunities for young people to connect. I think they need to have a space for themselves on Sabbath morning during Sabbath school time, absolutely, because you don't want someone to come to church and not find that space. But I also think we need to recognize that they're probably connecting on Friday night in a Bible study group. They've probably got a midweek group, on a Wednesday night that they've got opportunity to connect in as well. And that's where we see, young people love to go across all the different, all the different opportunities to connect. You know what I mean? They like that. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'd love to give you a really great answer of here's the one key, to re-engage young adults back on Sabbath morning. But I mean, we've seen this challenge for, as long as I can remember. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. But I think making space for them is really important. We need to, and giving them the responsibility as well, and saying, hey, you're out of teens, you're out of youth. What are you going to do for your group? Give them the tools. Say, give them a discovery Bible reading option, or a Sabbath School for Life type option, and say, hey, you don't necessarily have to sit down and work. It's not intimidating. It's not just Sabbath School pamphlet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You can take some key themes, take a key option and a key verse, and use it as sit down with a group of your friends and come before church and discuss it. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to function a certain way. You can make it your own. You can do your own thing. So I think we need to have space for creativity in the way we look at Bible study, especially Sabbath school. And that may mean for some, like I'm thinking of young parents especially, is providing a space after the church service for them to have Sabbath school, where they've put the kids down, or they've, or if they've gone home, put the kids down, provide something on Zoom. I don't know. I think we just need to be creative, because the world is looking very different. Lives are looking much more complex. And I think there's so much space where we can be creative in Sabbath school. And that may mean looking a little bit at our existing adult Sabbath schools and saying, how can we involve and include some of our young people? How can we, help them get involved, and part of that is the caring element. Can we reach out to them? Can we provide a spot for them in our Sabbath school? Can we ask them to serve? Can we ask them to engage? I think that's one of the first steps.
I can definitely relate to that, Linda. I think I completely agree with everything you say, because at my church, we've recently just started up a young adult Sabbath school. And that's something that for probably 10 years or more, like, there hasn't been a space for young adults. And suddenly, now that there is a space and the church has been intentional about that, people that I haven't seen in Sabbath school for years are like attending again. And it's really awesome to see that. But I also want to pick up on what you just mentioned about, like, maybe a slightly different structure or timing of Sabbath school. Diego commented before, he said, I've been part of some Sabbath school groups that regularly have lunch together or meet outside the Sabbath school time, which provides an informal space with less barriers to invite others. Now, I know that there's a few churches in Sydney that have adopted this approach. They do Sabbath school after the church service and eat together, and I think that's really great. But I've also heard reports from some of these people that it hasn't worked maybe as well as they'd hoped it would. I'm just wondering if you've seen any trends around that. Are more people adopting this? Like, because getting up at 9:30 is like a common thing. It's like, oh, it's too early to get up at Sabbath school, et cetera, et cetera. What have you noticed in that space?
Yeah, and there are a few churches that have decided to change things up a little bit. And I think it's great. I think creativity around this is really important. And actually, if you go back to the Sabbath School handbook that the GC produced a little while back, if you actually read through it and the advice that it gives around, setting up Sabbath school, it actually encourages Sabbath school leaders to be creative. It's like, some do prelims, some don't. Some discuss like this, some do Bible study like this, some do it before church, some do it after church. So I love that it promotes this great creativity. I think we've kind of lost that because we assume that Sabbath school has to look and feel a certain way. But something that we talk about all the time as directors is how, like I mentioned, our Sabbath school leaders are some of the most dedicated church members that I've seen, but they're also incredibly creative. Their desire is actually to see people engage with Bible study. So I think they're open to new ideas and open to doing things. And what I would say is you need to find what works within your context. So you've mentioned some churches have moved to a model where, Sabbath school happens in a time after the church service. I've seen that work really well. I've also seen contexts that have tried that and go, you know what, it's not for us, and that's okay. Some meet in the afternoon, some, do things. And I think the beauty about the Adventist church is that no church looks the same. While you get the Adventist feel in every church you attend, I just love that we have, creativity across what we do. And I think that we should create much more space for that, to do things differently. Some call them connect groups, some call them life groups that happen before a church service. Some call them Sabbath schools, some have prelims, some don't. I think any church you go to, Sabbath school will look different, even though it comes under the same banner. And I think that's the real beauty of it. There is no set rule about how we need to structure our Sabbath schools and set them up. And our directors are planning next year for a nationwide Sabbath school summit. And part of what we would like to talk about and challenge bringing our Sabbath school leaders together is say, hey, we give you permission to be creative in this space, to release our Sabbath school leaders and say, hey, do what's going to work best for your context, contextualize it and fit in with what's going to work at your local church and how you can best reach people, because that's what Sabbath school is all about. It's about Bible study, it's about community, and it's about reaching others for Jesus. So I think if we redraw that central focus, there's so much creativity that we can do in this space. I don't think we should be afraid of changing things up a little bit.
You say that, Lyndelle, which is great, but also at the same time, there's some feeling around that the curriculum, the Sabbath school curriculum, is the same right around the world, and that has benefits, but it also has, I guess, some drawbacks or some things that people take issue with. Can you speak to that a little bit? What the idea of because what you're saying, some of these ideas suggest going outside of the curriculum, and I think some people might be uncomfortable with that.
Well, I'm not necessarily suggesting going outside the curriculum if you're not comfortable with that. I know in some churches that's a strategy that has worked for them. I don't think there's anything, you have to figure out what works in your context. In terms of how to find creativity in that, yeah, it's hard. There's something really nice about knowing that the Sabbath school lesson that you're studying is currently being, the topic that you're studying is currently being covered all over the world. Like, you're part of this global movement that is all studying the same thing. It's kind of like there's something really cool and encouraging about that. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to translate into our context all that well. And that's where the role of the Sabbath school leader is incredibly important. You could look through the lesson and go, look, this is not, some of these topics may not particularly gel well with my group, but there's the way they break up this passage is, I think this is really going to work. And so you draw out what works, you be creative with it. And if your church is committed to following the Sabbath school curriculum, then there's absolutely ways that you can integrate it to your Sabbath school context. There's so many resources online where people have taken the lesson and broken it down to, create more engaging questions or contextualize it for different audiences. So there's a lot of potential there, I think. And I don't think we should necessarily feel limited because of the Sabbath school curriculum. We should see it as an opportunity to contextualize and be creative in our churches.
For sure. We actually put a post on Instagram just this morning, and actually yesterday, and then I posted it again this morning, but we got, I think, about 20 comments on this Instagram post, which is like way more than we usually get. And the question was like, what do you think about Sabbath school? Do you usually go to Sabbath school? And overwhelmingly, probably like 70-80% of the comments were really positive. Supporting Sabbath school and saying they go regularly. But there was one comment here that I thought was interesting that I just wanted to ask and see if you had anything to say. It's by Queen Elizabeth Pink, the username, and she says, I love Sabbath school and I faithfully attend every Sabbath, although now through Zoom because church is just, closed or whatever. Now I hear pastors say all the time that they don't study the Sabbath school lesson, and I see that they don't attend either. And then she says, so how can you ask a regular member to place importance on something that our biggest leaders neglect? Just my humble observation. Now, I'm not necessarily wanting to attack pastors here because they've got all kinds of things going on. I'm sure during Sabbath school, you would know. This is a trend that I see. I come to Sabbath school most weeks, and I'd say 70-80% of people haven't studied the lesson, which can make it more interesting because you get all kinds of perspectives, but also can make it a challenge because they haven't followed, they don't know what's happening. If it's a complicated week, then it's just kind of all over their head. How can we address that? Is that something we should be addressing? And yeah, with the pastors thing, I'm curious if you have anything to say about that as well.
Look, it's an interesting comment, and I'm really thankful for that comment too, because it shows that she really cares and is genuinely passionate about Sabbath school. And we see this all the time. I'm glad for that engagement on Instagram because I think it represents what's out there. People who attend and love Sabbath school are passionate advocates for it because they see the value in it. In terms of pastors and Sabbath school, look, as a pastor, it's tough. I mean, there's so many things that pastors do. Could we emphasize Sabbath school more in local church? Of course, but every department would say that the pastor needs to emphasize their department more as well. I think there's definitely an opportunity for pastors to lead by example. But you don't know what's happened for a pastor on Sabbath morning. They may not be in Sabbath school because they've been pulled out to deal with some sort of conflict. We can't sit from the outside and look in. So yeah, I think pastors should definitely be advocating for Sabbath school, but I'm not here to pass judgment on any of them. I know absolutely what it's like. But in terms of, the Sabbath school lesson, I think we need to remember that it is a tool for Bible study. It's not the Bible study. Do you know what I mean? It was designed as a way of helping people to do regular devotional time during the week. If you do regular devotional time with something else, that's okay. It's your regular, the fact that you're in the Bible every day to me is a win. That's good, and that's why we challenge people when we train for Sabbath school to pull out a key verse and to do this ask, analyze, apply kind of thing, because it breaks down the barrier of those who haven't studied. But also it's drawing out and it's engaging rather than just, there is a risk that if you start talking about the different topics that you're going to, disengage those that haven't been studying. And I think we need to be aware of that, because if we want our Sabbath schools to be evangelistic, I don't think we should come at it with a rod and say, well, we need to keep studying it, because people will just learn to do it during the week. Because if we really want our Sabbath schools to be evangelistic, then you know that there's going to be someone every week that isn't going to have studied their Sabbath school lesson because they're new. Do you know what I mean? So we need to start thinking with that attitude, and rather than it being a rod to our back, how can we use it to enhance our relationship with Jesus, our relationship with others, and enhance our Bible study time? Use it as a tool rather than the be-all and the end-all.
Lyndelle, how can we get, you said leaders were really important when it comes to Sabbath school, and I've seen that in my own experience. Like when you have a good Sabbath school leader, it really lifts the vibe of the class. And as you paid tribute, there's people in every church that they're busting their backs as a volunteer every week. They do extra prep, they cut out things for the kids, they go above and beyond. What sort of work, maybe you're doing some work in this space, maybe some of these people do need to know, because, Mary Ellen's touched on it a couple of times in some offhand comments, but about the burnout that some of these people can experience, because often they're not replaced. Sometimes they've been doing it for 12 years and they're tired. The volunteering weighs on them. They've got a full-time job. They've got maybe kids as well, and they're doing all this extra stuff. Could we be better? I think the answer is obvious. We could be better at mentoring and developing leaders, and maybe sharing the load in our Sabbath schools, creating systems where everyone's contributing and everyone comes as part of the group and spreads that out. But maybe there's some easy sort of tips or some observations that you've made in your time, looking at Sabbath schools, that you can pass on, that give us this encouragement to how to do that better. Because I just see a lot of people work for Sabbath school, and then they get tired, and then they're not replaced by anyone, or sometimes, things fall apart because they don't have the right person. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely see that, and I hear that as well. I mean, like I said, our Sabbath school training is some of the best attended, because Sabbath school leaders are just keen to see more people engage and to be better at what they do. And it's that passion that often leads to going above and beyond, and then people get burnt out and a bit frustrated as well. And so I think we need to do better at encouraging our Sabbath school leaders. What we're trying to do with our summit next year is to bring our Sabbath school leaders not for training, just for training, but as a time of encouragement, and as a time to say, we really value what you're doing. We really want to just place honor and lift you guys up and pray and support you. And out of that summit, we're working with conferences to try to develop a network of leaders to share the burden of resources, to network in terms of lesson ideas and that sort of thing. Because like I mentioned, there's a lot of resources out there, but it's hard to know what's contextualized for Australia, what's contextualized for our kind of culture. So creating a space for Sabbath school leaders to share ideas and to work together, I think, is going to be invaluable. But I think we really need to affirm them, but we also need to support our Sabbath school leaders to share the load. And that means if you're in a class, I'd challenge you to put your hand up to volunteer to teach or to lead, because I think we often think that it's this, it's reserved for a certain type of person, or you've got to be specially skilled. And our Sabbath school leaders are often ex-teachers. They're often very skilled. But I also think we shouldn't discredit this idea that, if you have a Bible, if you can read, and if you're comfortable sharing, why can't you open up the Bible and share with someone? We talk about it in personal ministry all the time. Find an opportunity to share what the Bible means to you with someone. It's a great starting point is in Sabbath school. Check out the themes of the lesson, pull it open, read the passage, look at a couple of commentaries, look at some resources online, and step up and help our Sabbath school leaders out, because that's something we probably don't do as well in church life, is sharing the load, is looking for someone to assist, asking for help. So I challenge anyone that attends Sabbath school to just put your hand up and say, look, yeah, I'd be willing to help out, whether it's take a lesson, whether it's covering a prayer time, whether it's reaching out to members that haven't attended in a while if you're not comfortable. It's just, let's just rally around our Sabbath school leaders and support the work that they do. I think that that can go a really long way for showing them how much we value what they do each Sabbath.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, everything that you're saying, I love and I completely agree with. Like, there's just so many amazing things about Sabbath School and so many things we should be doing as well, supporting our leaders and being more evangelistic and all of these wonderful, I guess, they're not necessarily theoretical because I know people do them, but I'm just like listening to all of this and looking at my own Sabbath School experience. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's just so much that we need to change, that we need to do. Like, where do we even begin? I guess I'm wondering, do you get frustrated by that? I know being at like more of an executive level with this sort of thing, it's always hard to filter these messages to the grassroots, but also where's the place to start for people watching at home who are thinking, oh my goodness, my Sabbath School experience is just so not like what Lyndelle is describing. What's the first thing to do?
Yeah, and I see that. I mean, like, I've worked in church, I've seen good Sabbath schools, I've seen bad Sabbath schools, I've visited good and I shouldn't say bad, less effective Sabbath schools, because all Sabbath school is great. I know I'm being really optimistic here, but I just love Sabbath school. But in terms of a place to start, I know it's going to feel really mundane and like, well, duh. But it's prayer. Prayer is one of the most powerful tools that I've ever seen. And we say it at the beginning of the Sabbath School for Life training is if you want to see change in your Sabbath school, and even if you don't feel particularly supported in that, find someone who does want to see the same thing as you and sit down and pray with them. Pray for a member to join your group, and then you'll be 3. And then go to your pastor and talk to your pastor and say, I want to see change in Sabbath school. I want some support. Help me. Show me some resources. They'll send you to disciple.org.au, which is where you can find a whole host of resources. And all the stuff on disciple.org.au is populated by our conference directors. So it's your local conference directors creating stuff for Sabbath school, particularly for our volunteers and our local church members that are serving. So, there is power in prayer and inviting the Holy Spirit to see change in your Sabbath school. And it's baby steps to find someone who agrees with you. Come together, challenge your group to do one small thing, whether it's creating a prayer list so you can see specifically where God's working, whether it's doing something evangelistic, or whether it's just committing yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to find someone who hasn't been attending my youth group, Mary Ellen, for a while, and I'm going to connect with them. I think, the whole idea of starting with us first is the reason it's a bit of a cliche is because it works. It's potent, it's powerful, and let's not discount the power of the Holy Spirit to work in me to see a change happen. That's what I always encourage my Sabbath school leaders to do. Start with prayer, start with prayer, start with prayer. It's powerful.
Absolutely. I love how practical this interview has been, Lyndelle. Often when we talk about topics like Sabbath school or like any topic, it can be kind of theoretical, but I really love your emphasis on being practical. I think that's something we need to bring into Sabbath school as well. Usually I would ask as kind of like a final question, how can we put things into practice? But you've just mentioned disciple.org as like a resource hub, which is amazing. Are there any other things? Yeah.
I should also mention, particularly for young adult Sabbath school, we've just released a series. And if you haven't heard of Inverse, it's only been around for a little while. It's the new collegiate version of Sabbath school. So especially for you, Mary Ellen, in your new young adult Sabbath school group. And the Inverse is a really innovative way of doing a Sabbath school pamphlet. It follows a journaling guide. So if you're the journaling type, or if you've got young adults that like to journal, you buy the guide and it's got all this open space where you basically take a key text and you journal it for the whole week. And then you come together on Sabbath morning and everyone discusses what they learned, which is really kind of cool because you're focused on one verse, so it doesn't feel too necessarily disruptive. So we've got funding to do 8 quarters of that. We've just released the first one, which is on biblical sexuality, which is available on disciple.org.au as a discussion starter. So that's another really cool thing. The Sabbath School for Life information and training little pamphlets you can download from disciple.org.au, but also the SPD, and you're probably aware of this, has been releasing for the last couple of years those Sabbath School opener videos, which I've found really valuable. It's a great way to open up the topic without being too sort of exclusive with the pamphlet, and then it opens up with a discussion, especially around discovery Bible reading. Anyone can do it. So let's take the pressure off our Sabbath school leaders and get involved and offer to do something like that. I think we'll see, some awesome changes.
I think that's right. That's a good thing to leave with our viewers, that anyone can participate. And I guess models of Sabbath school that encourage participation and give everyone a go can also take some of that burden off the leaders that we're talking about. If we're all just studying the Bible and journeying and growing together, that's a really important part of what Sabbath school can do for our local community of belief. So Lyndelle, thanks for joining us today. I think as you've been speaking, your passion for Sabbath school has shone through, and I hope that people watching have got some, helpful tips and some good ideas, maybe something they haven't thought of before that they can take away and use in their stuff. I like your what was it again? Analyze. Give us the A's again.
Ask. So icebreaker, analyze, open up a passage, and apply.
Beautiful.
Ask,
I think we can leave that with our viewers. Ask, analyze, apply. That's what we try and do here on Record Wrap. We ask a curly question, we analyze it for a while, and then we look at ways to practically do it. And I think we've had heaps of practical advice today. So this is kind of like Sabbath school for all you people that join us each week. Thank you for joining us each week, and we love your comments.
And now you've got something to take home.
And now you've got something to take home. So take it to your Sabbath school this Sabbath, or whenever you have Sabbath school. Because as you said, Lyndelle, people are meeting in small groups all throughout the week and building that Christian community. So is there anything else you'd like to say just to leave us with?
Look, I just want to say thank you. And I wanted to say, if you are watching and you're a Sabbath school leader, we love you. We think you're great. You guys do an incredible work every week. You're so dedicated. We're especially blessed for my girls and their Sabbath school leaders. And I just love that we've got church members that are so committed every week to bringing and teaching and opening up dialogue and discussion in the Word of God. I think as a church to have something like this is such a huge blessing. So be encouraged, Sabbath school leaders, and if you're not, step up, get involved, and I'd love to see a huge change. God willing, let's pray that God will empower our Sabbath schools to be even better than they currently are.
Absolutely. I like that emphasis on prayer. As we said, pray, and then ask, analyze, and apply. Again, thank you, Lyndelle, so much for your insights and for joining us. And we will see you guys next week. Feel free to leave more comments and questions in the comments. We'll get to them later. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thanks.